For wearing the wrong jacket, they tried to erase a mother from her son's triumph. They didn't know that jacket represented a promise, and the men who made that promise were watching every single move they made. Smelled of money. It was a cloying mix of freshly cut grass, blooming hydrangeas, and the expensive, airy perfumes of women who had never known a day of hard labor. Ava Rodriguez, 45, breathed it in but didn't let it settle. She was accustomed to the scent of diesel, hot metal, and ozone. This was a foreign atmosphere, a different planet. She found her seat in the fourth row, her name, Ava Rodriguez, parent of valedictorian, printed on a neat placard. She sat, planting her worn-out combat boots squarely on the ground. Her posture was perfect, a ramrod straightness that came not from etiquette class, but from years of military discipline. Her hands, clean but with grease permanently etched into the cuticles, folded over the ceremony program in her lap. She wore the jacket. It was a faded BDU, battle dress uniform, jacket, softened from 1,000 washes. It hung on her small frame, a relic from another life. On the right shoulder was a reversed American flag patch, its stars facing forward into the fight, now faded to a ghostly gray. Over the left pocket, a simple name tape read, Rodriguez, a tribute to the man who gave her a new name and a son who was about to conquer this world. It wasn't a costume, it was a skin she had earned. The quiet didn't last. The murmur of the crowd crescendoed with the arrival of Catherine Covington. Draped in a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than Ava's truck, she moved as if she were parting the Red Sea. Her husband trailed dutifully behind, carrying a seat cushion. Mrs. Covington's eyes, shielded by oversized sunglasses, scanned the VIP rows. They landed on Ava's olive-drab silhouette amidst a sea of pastels and silks. She didn't gasp. She didn't recoil. She did something far worse. She paused, tilted her head, and leaned into the ear of another mother, her whisper just loud enough to carry. "I thought we paid for better curation," she murmured, a slight, venomous smile playing on her lips. "Someone should really clear out the clutter before the photos start." The words were a quiet assassination. Ava felt them land, not like a blow, but like a familiar, cold weight. She didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on the stage where her son, Ethan, would soon stand. She had learned long ago that the most important battles were fought in the stillness, in the refusal to let them see they'd drawn blood. The chain reaction was swift and silent. A note was passed. A staffer scurried. And then, two men in dark suits, their security earpieces glinting in the June sun, appeared at her elbow. They moved with a practiced, non-threatening glide. "Ma'am," the first one began, his voice a smooth blend of courtesy and steel. "We're so sorry for the inconvenience, but we're making some last-minute adjustments to optimize the guest experience. We need to relocate this seat." Ava looked up, her brown eyes clear and steady. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stated a fact. "This seat has my name on it." "We understand," the second guard said, his smile never reaching his eyes. It was the kind of smile that wasn't meant to comfort, but to manage. "It's an administrative request. We'll ensure you have an excellent view from the overflow section." Administrative request. Optimize. Relocate. Ava knew the language. It was the sterile, corporate dialect used to enforce class lines without ever having to say the words, "You don't belong here." She stood, not in defeat, but in tactical retreat. Arguing here was a losing battle. It would create a scene, and the one thing she would not do was cast a shadow on her son's day. She gathered her program. As she followed them, her boots made a soft, defiant scuff on the pristine brick walkway. They led her back one row, then two. Another parent with an important-looking lanyard was ushered into the space she'd just vacated. Then, inch by inch, polite request by polite request, Ava Rodriguez was moved. She was escorted past the smiling faces, past the whispers and veiled glances, until she found herself in the 10th row, at the very edge of the canopy. The sun beat down on her knees, and the scent of mulch was stronger than the perfume. She was an island, isolated and silent. But she was still here. And for now, that would have to be enough. That jacket, the one Catherine Covington had dismissed as clutter, was woven from the threads of a life that would have shattered a weaker woman. Ava hadn't been born into the quiet resilience she now wore like armor, it had been forged in fire and loss. Her military career began not with a heroic charge, but in the sterile, fluorescent-lit rooms of an intelligence analysis unit. As a young woman, she'd learned that true power wasn't in the loudest voice, but in the sharpest mind. She was a senior NCO, a planner, the one who saw the battlefield as a chessboard, moving assets and anticipating threats while others saw only chaos. She earned respect not with volume, but with unnerving accuracy. She met Ava Rodriguez at a VA support event. He was a Marine, forced into early retirement by a training injury that left him with a slight limp and a deep distrust of institutional promises. He was vibrant and loud, with a laugh that filled every room and hands that were meant to build and fix things. He was second-generation Latino, the son of a welder, and he saw through Ava's disciplined exterior to the lonely woman beneath. Their connection was immediate and profound, a bond between two people who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Her family, with their quiet, suburban sensibilities, didn't approve. They saw Mateo's brown skin, heard his accent, and saw a blue-collar mechanic, not the decorated Marine who had cried in her arms over the friends he'd lost. "Are you sure about this, Ava?" her father had asked, his voice laced with a disappointment that cut deeper than any insult. "This is a different world." He was right. It was a different world, and they built it together. They married at the courthouse, with two friends as witnesses, and moved into a small rental on the edge of town, far from the manicured lawns of Northgate. Ava left the military, and they poured their savings into a small auto repair shop. Mateo's hands, which had once serviced military vehicles, now brought life back to the town's aging cars. Ava, with her planner's mind, ran the business. Their son, Ethan, was born with his father's wide, curious eyes and his mother's quiet intensity. For a few perfect years, their small world was enough. The accident happened on a gray Tuesday. A hydraulic lift at a construction site, its safety inspections pencil-whipped for months by a contractor eager to cut costs, collapsed. Mateo, who was there delivering a repaired generator, was crushed. The construction company, owned by a cousin of the Covington family, denied all wrongdoing. The official report cited an unforeseeable mechanical failure. The case was quietly closed. The town's silence was deafening. No casseroles arrived at her door. No neighbors offered condolences. The whispers that had followed them as a couple now turned into a wall of indifference. She was a widow, a single mother, a problem they wished would just disappear. When she tried to enroll Ethan in a preschool program, she was told, very politely, that the spots were filled. When she applied for a small business loan to keep the garage afloat, the bank manager, a man who played golf with Mr. Covington, cited her lack of stable collateral. It was a systemic erasure, a quiet, polite shunning designed to push her out. But they underestimated her. They didn't know she had been trained to survive in hostile territory. Grief was a fire, and she let it burn away everything but the essential. She learned to fix engines herself, working late into the night after putting Ethan to bed. She kept her head down, her voice low, and her standards high. She didn't just raise a son, she forged a survivor. She taught him to see the world not for its polite lies, but for its hard truths. She taught him that his heritage, a mix of his mother's Anglo grit and his father's Latino fire, was not a weakness, but a superpower. The town had taken her husband and tried to take her future. She would not let them take her sons. She would hold her ground, a silent, immovable object against the force of their indifference. And in that silent war, she had already won. The 6 men who would later stand in silent formation at Northgate Academy first met Ava Rodriguez in the blistering heat of the Nevada desert, at a place that officially didn't exist. It was a SEER school, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, a crucible where the military's most elite soldiers were pushed past their breaking points. The SEALs, all swagger and sun-bleached hair, were there for a joint training exercise. Ava was a guest instructor. When she walked into the briefing room, a short, quiet woman in her late 30s with analytical eyes, a few of them smirked. They were expecting a grizzled, barrel-chested Master Chief, not a former Intel NCO who looked more like a librarian than a warrior. Her subject was asymmetrical threat analysis in urban environments. She spoke calmly, without notes, about reading the patterns of a city, about how power grids, sewer systems, and human desperation could be mapped and weaponized. They listened, a few with polite skepticism. The test came 3 days later. The scenario was an urban hostage rescue, designed by the school's most sadistic instructors to be unwinnable. The SEAL team was inserted into a sprawling mock city, tasked with extracting a high-value target. Every move they made was countered. Snipers appeared on rooftops they'd cleared. IEDs blocked their planned exfiltration routes. The intelligence they'd been given was faulty, leading them into a perfectly orchestrated kill box. From the command center, Ava watched the screens, her face impassive. The lead instructor called it. Mission failed. Team is compromised. Negative, Ava said, her voice cutting through the room's tense silence. Everyone turned. She pointed to a dusty, decades-old schematic of the city's water and sanitation system she'd pulled from the archives. They're not seeing the real map. You've trapped them in 2 dimensions. Her finger traced a line on the old blueprint. There's a storm drain access tunnel right here, under the main street. It's a forgotten artery. It bypasses all 3 choke points and comes out 2 blocks from the extraction zone. The instructors scoffed. That's not on the operational map. The enemy doesn't care about your operational map, Ava retorted, her voice hardening. She got on the radio. Her instructions to the SEAL team leader were not suggestions, they were clear, concise, and logical. She guided them through the darkness, her calm voice a lifeline in the chaos. They emerged from the tunnel, disoriented but alive, with their hostage, having successfully navigated a maze designed to be inescapable. Later that night, the team's youngest member, a cocky sniper named Deacon, sat alone, staring at the floor, the bravado stripped from him by the near failure. Ava didn't lecture him. She simply sat down beside him and handed him a cup of coffee. My first op as an analyst, I missed a key piece of intel, she said quietly. We lost 2 good people. Failure isn't the end. It's tuition. That moment of humanity, more than her tactical brilliance, cemented her status. They stopped seeing a female instructor. They saw a leader. They started calling her guide, not as a casual nickname, but as a title of profound respect. She had taught them that the most critical weapon in their arsenal wasn't a rifle, but a mind that refused to accept the limits others set for it. They finished their rotation and deployed a week later. They never saw her again. But they never forgot their guide. And they made a silent pact that if she ever needed them, they would come. No matter where, no matter when. Back in the 10th row, the sun was relentless. Ava felt a bead of sweat trace a path down her temple, but she didn't move to wipe it away. The ceremony droned on, the choir sang, the salutatorian made a predictable joke about caffeine, and parents fanned themselves with their programs. For Ava, the entire event had transformed into a tactical observation. She watched the crowd, not as a collection of people, but as a network of alliances and power structures. Catherine Covington and her court were the command and control element, issuing social edicts through whispers and glances. The school administration and security were the enforcement arm, carrying out directives under the guise of procedure. And she, Ava, had been successfully neutralized, a soft target, isolated from her objective without a single shot fired. A flicker of a grim smile touched her lips. It was a clean operation. She had to give them that. Her eyes found Ethan on the stage. He stood tall among the other graduates, his dark curls a stark contrast to the sea of blonde hair. His face was a mask of calm composure she had taught him well. For a fleeting moment, his eyes scanned the VIP section, a slight furrow in his brow. He was looking for her. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She willed him not to see her, not here, not relegated to the sidelines. She didn't want his triumph tainted by her humiliation. He held his gaze for a second longer, then turned his attention back to the podium, his jaw set. He hadn't seen her. A wave of relief, sharp and painful, washed over her. Miles away, yet right on the perimeter, no one noticed the 6 men. They had been there for over an hour, blending into the landscape like shadows. They stood in different spots, one near the parking lot, another by the gymnasium, a third near the main gate. They looked like dads or alumni in their dark slacks and crisp dress shirts. But their stillness was wrong. It was the absolute stillness of predators, of men who knew how to wait. Through a pair of stabilized binoculars, the one they called Hartley watched the scene unfold. He had seen Ava escorted from her seat. He'd watched every polite smile that pushed her further away. He keyed the tiny microphone on his wrist. Guide is in position 10. Eastern flank. Exposed, his voice was a low, professional murmur. The reply came instantly in his earpiece from Deacon, positioned 100 yards away. Copy. No contact from her. She won't make contact, Hartley stated. That's not her way. We hold until the valedictory. Roger. Holding. There was no more conversation. There was no need. They weren't here to intervene, not yet. They were here to bear witness. They were a silent, unseen jury, watching a trial Ava didn't even know she was a part of. The pomp and circumstance of the ceremony was just noise. The real event, the one that mattered, was the treatment of the woman who had once saved them all. And for that, there would be a reckoning. The air grew thick with anticipation, a storm gathering in the bright, cloudless sky. The ceremony reached its crescendo just as the student body president was wrapping up his speech. It was then that the rhythm of the day fractured. It started not with a shout, but with measured steps on the gravel path bordering the great lawn. From the west, a single figure emerged. Tall, lean, dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit. He walked with a purpose that was utterly alien to the languid, celebratory atmosphere. Then another figure appeared from the east. And another from the south. One by one, 6 men converged, their paths precise, their pace synchronized. They didn't march down the central aisle, they moved along the flanks, their presence a ripple that turned into a wave of confused silence. The crowd turned, murmuring. Who were they? Federal agents? A surprise from a governor? Principal Kent leaned over to an aide, his polished composure finally cracking. Do we know who they are? The aide just shook her head, her eyes wide. The 6 men didn't stop at the back. They continued forward until they stood in a perfect line at the base of the stage, facing not the graduates, but the audience. They stood between the people in power and the people who mattered. Hartley, his jaw set like granite, stepped forward. He looked directly at Principal Kent. His voice was not loud, but it carried the authority of a battlefield command, slicing through the stunned silence. Sir, he said, his tone respectful but unyielding. We're here for our guide. Her seat is not back there. He made a short, sharp gesture with his chin toward the 10th row, where Ava sat, frozen. Her heart didn't leap. It settled. A deep, anchoring weight that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for years finally found the floor. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Hartley turned his gaze to the crowd, his eyes sweeping over the front rows, lingering for a fraction of a second on Catherine Covington, whose smug smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief. That woman, Hartley declared, his voice ringing with absolute conviction, taught members of SEAL Teams 2, 4, and 6 how to survive when they were supposed to die. She taught us how to think when fear told us to run. Her call sign is Guide. Today, you call her the mother of the valedictorian. We call her a living legend. No one in this place has earned a front row seat more than she has. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. It was the sound of a world being reordered. On the stage, Ethan stood, his face unreadable. Then, he did something no one expected. He broke ranks. He walked down from the platform, past the stunned faculty, and approached the 6 men. He stopped before Hartley, his eyes meeting the veterans. Then, the 17-year-old valedictorian, son of Ava and Mateo Rodriguez, raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute. All 6 seals returned it in crisp, unified motion. That single gesture shattered the stillness. Someone in the back, an old man with a veteran's pin on his lapel, shot to his feet and began to clap. The sound was a single crack of thunder, followed by a torrent. Within seconds, the entire audience was on its feet, the applause rolling across the lawn, not polite, but raw, thunderous, and deeply felt. People were crying. Teachers, parents, students, all rising for the woman in the faded BDU jacket. When the applause finally subsided, it was time for the valedictorian address. Ethan walked to the podium, his diploma in hand. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze finding his mother's. He set the diploma down and pushed aside his carefully prepared speech. "I had a speech," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone. "It was about looking to the future. But it's worthless if we don't first have the courage to look at the present." He took a breath. "My mother, Ava Rodriguez, has been pushed aside and overlooked by this town for my entire life. Some of you who knew my father, Mateo Rodriguez, made sure of that. Today, this institution, which preaches excellence and respect, asked her to leave her seat because her jacket didn't fit the aesthetic." A wave of shame washed over the crowd. Catherine Covington looked as if she'd been struck. "You want to talk about values?" Ethan's voice grew stronger, ringing with the fire of his father and the steel of his mother. "Honor is not a word you print on a banner. It's raising a son alone while working 2 jobs. Courage is not about facing an opponent you know you can beat. It's facing a world that pretends you don't exist. And commitment is showing up for people who have forgotten you, just because you gave your word." He gestured to the 6 men standing like sentinels. "Those men are here today because they understand those values. They came because someone you chose to ignore, someone you called clutter, saved their lives. Her name is Ava Rodriguez. If this school values anything it claims to, it will remember her name long after it forgets the names of its biggest donors. Because people like my mother don't just pass through. They are the foundation everything else is built on." He stepped back from the podium. There was no closing joke, no clever sign-off. There was only the undeniable, ringing truth. And for the second time, the crowd rose, their applause not just an ovation, but an apology. The ceremony concluded in a daze. The final announcements and the traditional tossing of caps felt like an afterthought, a pale echo of the real event that had just transpired. As students swarmed the field, Ethan walked past his cheering classmates, past the faculty, and straight to the 10th row. He bent down and kissed his mother's cheek. "We did it," he whispered. They didn't stay for photos. As they began to walk away, the 6 seals approached. They didn't offer handshakes or platitudes. Hartley stepped forward and pressed a heavy, metallic object into Ava's palm. It was a challenge coin. On one side was an intricate seal trident. On the other, engraved around the edge, were the words "In honor of our guide." In the center was a single, polished number, 6. "There are debts that can never be repaid, ma'am," Deacon said, his voice thick with emotion. "We just wanted to make a down payment." Ava looked at the coin, then at the faces of these men, warriors who had seen the worst of the world, and gave a single, sharp nod. It was an acknowledgement, a thank you, and a dismissal all in one. Her part was done. Theirs was too. In the weeks that followed, the story rippled through the community, not as gossip, but as a legend. The local paper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Who is the real guest of honor?" featuring a photo of Ethan at the podium, with Ava and the 6 stoic men in the background. Principal Kent announced his early retirement to spend more time with family. Catherine Covington quietly resigned from every board and committee she sat on. Her name simply vanished from the town's social roster. At the first PTA meeting of the new school year, a motion was made to create a new award. It was called the Rodriguez Recognition for Unseen Service, to be given each year to a member of the community whose contributions were often overlooked. It passed unanimously. Ava never attended those meetings. She was back in her garage, her hands covered in grease, teaching a neighborhood kid how to rebuild a carburetor. The boy, no older than Ethan, looked at her in awe one afternoon. "You're teaching me how to fix things," he said. Ava smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up her face. She handed him a wrench. "No," she said. "I'm teaching you how to not need permission." The challenge coin sat in a small wooden box on her dresser. She never showed it to anyone. It didn't need to be seen to be real. Its weight was a private reminder that honor, true honor, is not given by a crowd. It's forged in silence and acknowledged by the few who understand its true worth. We all have guides in our lives. The quiet heroes, the unseen forces, the mothers and fathers, mentors and friends who build the foundations we stand on. Their stories often go unheard. What did Ava's story make you feel? Who is the guide in your life that the world needs to know about? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect. If this story moved you, share it, so that other silent heroes might finally be seen. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.